My name is Skylar Sanderberg. I'm 27 years old, and I haven't spoken to my sister in 2 years. Not since the closet. Not since the door shut and I heard her laugh. Low, bitter, and final. This story isn't just about what happened that day. It's about what led up to it, and what I had to lose to finally find peace. So, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Let's go back. It was a Tuesday morning. A dry, pale light filtered through the blinds of our childhood home in Phoenix. I had flown back for one night. Just one. My flight from New York landed late, and I barely slept. But none of that mattered, because in a few hours, I was going to walk into the biggest interview of my life. Senior Strategy Associate at Lumina and Blake. I had dreamed of this firm since I was 22. I memorized the team bios. I practiced mock interviews in my apartment. I studied every case study until I could quote stats in my sleep. I was ready. At least, I thought I was. I stood in the guest bathroom, smoothing my navy blazer, when I caught her reflection behind me. Madison. My older sister by 2 years. She leaned against the doorframe, one eyebrow raised, sipping coffee from Mom's favorite mug, the one I bought her in college. Going to a funeral or a job interview, she said, smirking. I tried to smile. Interview, big one. She nodded slowly. Right. The one you flew across the country for. There was a pause. One of those silences that says too much. Madison always knew how to fill a room with cold without lifting a finger. I didn't think you'd still go, she added. Why wouldn't I? She looked away, shrugged, and walked off. That was the first moment I should have known something was off. But I was so focused, so wired on adrenaline and ambition, that I let it go. 20 minutes later, I was gathering my portfolio, heels on, lip gloss applied, when I realized I left my printed resume in the kitchen. I walked down the hallway and past the laundry room. The door was open. A box had spilled over, and socks were scattered like breadcrumbs on the floor. I stooped to pick one up, and the door slammed behind me. Click. Silence. Madison, I called. No answer. I jiggled the handle. It didn't budge. Seriously, open the door. Still nothing. And then, I heard it. A quiet laugh. Her laugh. I pounded the door. Madison, open the damn door. This isn't funny. But apparently, to her, it was. Because after 30 seconds, I heard footsteps walking away. Her voice echoed down the hallway. You always make everything so dramatic. I felt the panic rise like floodwater. My watch read 7:50 a.m. I had 40 minutes to be downtown. My phone was in the kitchen. No one else was home. Mom and Dad had gone to breakfast. I was completely, utterly alone. The room was pitch black. No windows, no outlet, no clock. Only the sound of my breath tightening, the faint hum of the dryer I never started, and the loud thud of my fist against the door again and again. I was locked in a goddamn closet, and my sister thought it was funny. Eventually, too late, my dad opened the door. Oh, there you are, he said. Madison said you were in the bathroom. My face must have said everything. He frowned. You okay? I pushed past him, sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed my phone. 3 missed calls from the recruiter. An email. We understand if circumstances change. Please reach out if you'd like to reschedule. But I knew. It was over. I didn't get the interview. Didn't get the call back. Didn't get the job. I sat on the couch, trembling. My blazer was wrinkled. My eyes red. My future unraveling like loose thread. When Mom walked in and saw me, she looked confused. Didn't you have somewhere to be? I could barely speak. Madison locked me in the laundry room. My mother blinked, then laughed. A short, dismissive laugh. Oh, Sky, you always take things so seriously. She locked me in, on purpose. I missed my interview. Madison came down the stairs, not a hint of guilt on her face. Relax. It was a joke. I looked at them, my family, the people who were supposed to protect me, and I realized something sharp and painful. They didn't see me. To them, I was still the fragile little sister who overreacted, who couldn't take a joke, who always tried too hard. They didn't see how hard I worked, how far I came. To them, success wasn't mine to have. It was something I was borrowing, just long enough for them to take it back. But I wasn't about to cry, not in front of them. I stood up. I picked up my coat. I booked a new flight. I didn't hug anyone goodbye. On the plane ride back, I stared out the window and remembered the first time Madison ever turned on me. It wasn't the closet. It was the dance recital when I was 11. I had practiced every night in the garage, alone, while Madison watched TV. When recital day came, I couldn't find my costume. It was gone. Vanished. I had to perform in my warm-up clothes while she wore her sparkling blue tutu. Back then, I thought it was a coincidence. Now, I knew better. But here's the part that hurts the most. That morning in Phoenix, it wasn't just a prank. It was sabotage. And I needed to know why. Because if someone's willing to destroy your future just to see you fall, that's not a sister. That's something else entirely. And I was done pretending it wasn't. Before the closet, before the door clicked shut and something inside me cracked. I believed in fairness. I know how naive that sounds, but it's the truth. I believed that hard work paid off, that talent rose to the top, that if you did the right thing long enough, eventually it would matter. I believed that family had your back. And above all, I believed that love could outgrow resentment. That belief built my world. In New York, my days were long but full. I woke at 6 every morning, no alarm needed. I'd boil water for tea and review my emails while the sun rose in streaks between my apartment blinds. I lived alone in a modest studio in Midtown, a walk-up with creaky floors and a view of a fire escape. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I worked as an assistant project coordinator at a boutique marketing firm called Brick and Marrow. The hours were brutal, the expectations sharp, but I was learning fast. I loved strategy, puzzles, figuring out why a campaign succeeded and how to make it better. I was the girl who took notes at meetings no one else bothered to write. The girl who stayed after to redesign slides just in case the client cared about visuals. The invisible glue that made things smoother. Not flashy, but consistent. And in New York, that meant something. Outside of work, my circle was tight. Just 2 people, really. Tessa, my best friend from grad school who lived in Brooklyn and always wore leather boots no matter the weather. And Noah, my neighbor across the hall. We weren't dating, though sometimes it felt like we could have been in another life. He'd knock with leftover curry or chocolate croissants when he had too much, and I'd bring over wine when I was tired of working in silence. He listened. That mattered more than I realized at the time. But the biggest relationship in my life, the one that still had its hooks in my ribcage, was with Madison. My sister. Growing up in Phoenix, we weren't close. Not really. We didn't fight much, but we didn't share secrets either. Madison was the sun, and I orbited around her, trying to catch a little warmth. She was captain of the swim team, homecoming queen, voted most likely to marry rich. She had a way of walking into a room and making people look twice, not because of what she wore, though she always looked flawless, but because of how she made people feel, chosen, until you weren't. Our parents adored her. Of course they did. She was the firstborn, the confident one, the one who never cried at sleepovers or needed help with math homework. I was the quiet one, the one with the journals, the anxiety meds, the scholarships no one remembered to frame. They never said they had a favorite, but they didn't have to. Even as adults, that dynamic clung to us. When I got promoted last year, I told Mom on the phone. She congratulated me, then asked if I'd seen Madison's new apartment. She has a view of Camelback Mountain, And you should see her pool. That was always the subtext. Madison's life was glossy, and mine was fine. Still, I tried. I sent birthday cards. I called during holidays. I flew out for Dad's retirement party even when it meant missing Noah's gallery show. I made room for them. I kept believing that maybe, if I just did more, they'd finally see me for who I was becoming. That's the part that stings most. I thought we were on better terms. The last time Madison and I talked before the interview trip, she sounded soft. She asked about work, about New York, about what I wanted next. I told her about Lumina and Blake, the dream job. I told her they were flying me out for a final interview and that I'd be staying one night at home. She said, "That's amazing, Sky. I'm proud of you." I actually cried after that call. I thought we had turned a corner. I thought maybe we were rewriting something, but what I didn't understand then, what I should have, was that Madison never liked being in the passenger seat. She could play supportive. She could wear that mask. But the moment she felt eclipsed, even for a second, she burned the whole stage down. Looking back now, the red flags were all there. Like when I was 16 and got accepted to a summer writing program at Stanford. Madison told me she was happy for me, but later I found my acceptance letter ripped in half at the bottom of the recycling bin, or when I won the state poetry contest, and during dinner she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I mean, it's not like poetry gets you a job." Mom laughed. Dad nodded. I pretended to laugh, too. Or the time she accidentally spilled cranberry juice on my white prom dress the night before. I borrowed a gown from a neighbor. She wore hers like royalty. These weren't coincidences. They were patterns. Quiet acts of war dressed in smiles and sisterhood. But I never let myself believe it. Because believing it meant admitting something dark. That someone who shared my blood could also want to see me fail. Instead, I told myself stories. She's just stressed. She doesn't mean it. She had a harder time growing up than I did. Narratives that made it easier to love her. That protected my heart. But in doing so, I left the door wide open for her to hurt me again. When I got the interview email from Lumina, I sat in the office stairwell, heart racing. I called Tessa first, then I called my mom. Madison answered instead. She said, "Mom's in the garden. Want me to tell her?" "No, I'll call back," I said, and then I hesitated. "Madison, I got an interview, final round, in Phoenix." There was a beat of silence, then a long exhale. "Wow," she said. "That's really big." "Yeah. I guess you'll be staying here then?" "Just one night. I'll get in Monday night, leave Tuesday after the interview." "No problem," she said. "I'll clear the guest room." It felt sincere. That's the trick with Madison. She knows how to wear sincerity like a tailored coat. Just enough warmth to make you believe. The night I arrived, she even offered me wine. Sat across from me on the porch and asked about New York. She told me about her new job. She was working in real estate, flipping houses. "It's not glamorous," she said, "but I make more than I ever did with a 9-to-5. We laughed about high school, shared old stories. It felt easy, familiar." She leaned over and said, "You've really changed, Sky. You're so polished now. You used to be all nerves and sweatshirts." I smiled. Still nervous, just better shoes. She toasted her glass to mine. To better shoes. That moment, that memory, I held on to it like it meant something. Because the truth is, even after everything, I still wanted her to like me. I still wanted to believe that deep down, she cared. But I was wrong. And the next morning, when she locked me in that closet and laughed through the door, that illusion shattered. Because that wasn't just cruelty, it was calculation. And suddenly, everything that came before it, the compliments, the porch wine, the stories, felt poisoned. The ordinary world I thought I knew, it was a stage. and I'd been cast as the fool. People assume betrayal happens all at once. A knife in the back, a shout in the rain, a truth you didn't want to hear. But sometimes, betrayal is slow. It shows up with a smile, wraps its arms around you, and whispers, "You're overreacting." That morning, when my dad finally opened the laundry door, I didn't say anything right away. I walked past him. I walked past Madison. I walked straight to the sink and washed my hands. Not because they were dirty, but because I couldn't stop shaking. I felt like if I stopped moving, I'd scream. Mom asked what was wrong. I told her. Madison locked me in. She didn't deny it. She just tilted her head, like she was confused by my reaction. "Oh my God, Sky, it was barely 5 minutes. You're being so dramatic." 5 minutes? It was almost 30. Long enough for me to miss the interview call. Long enough to miss the only window I had to prove myself. "She was screaming," Dad said. "I thought someone was dying." Madison shrugged. "Well, maybe don't go snooping around the house before your big job thing." "Snooping?" I repeated. I was getting my resume from the kitchen. And then the words that still echo, sharp and mocking, from my own mother's mouth. "Oh, come on, Skylar. You didn't really think you were going to get that job anyway, did you?" The room went still. My chest tightened so fast I couldn't breathe. No one corrected her. Not Madison. Not my dad. That's when it happened. Not just the betrayal, the collapse. Because it wasn't just about the closet. It was about everything underneath it. I looked around the living room, the couch we watched Disney movies on, the photo wall of Madison's swim trophies and me blurred in the background, the fireplace mantle that had framed her graduation photo, not mine. I stood there, 27 years old, and realized this house had never been mine. Not really. I wasn't the daughter who called first. I wasn't the sister they bragged about. I was a visitor they tolerated, until I got too loud, too hopeful, too close to having something more. I said nothing. I picked up my coat, grabbed my bag, and walked out. My flight wasn't for 8 hours. I didn't care. I went to the airport anyway. Sat at gate B12 for 6 hours straight. No food, no water. Just the hum of strangers and a nausea in my throat I couldn't swallow. I tried to text Noah, then Tessa, but I didn't hit send. What would I even say? My sister sabotaged my life and my mom laughed. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted a time machine. Back in New York, I didn't unpack. I just crawled into bed in my wrinkled interview blazer and stared at the ceiling. At 3 a.m., I finally broke, not in a cinematic, pretty tears kind of way. No violin soundtrack. Just me, curled on my side, shaking. Silent sobs into a pillow that didn't know what hit it. It was more than sadness. It was disorientation. Everything I thought was true wasn't. My whole identity cracked open. I had spent years becoming someone I was proud of. I worked through panic attacks, student debt, imposter syndrome. I made something from nothing. And in one moment, one door click, it all crumbled. Not because I failed, but because someone else made sure I would. And the part that burned the most, it worked. She won. Madison didn't just ruin my shot. She knew how much it meant to me. She knew what that job represented. It wasn't about a paycheck. It was about liberation. A chance to write a new story with no shadows, no side comments, no comparing Christmas cards. She took that, and then acted like it was a joke. For the first few days, I froze. I didn't return texts. I didn't go to work. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without feeling stupid, like I had been living in a dream and someone just shook me awake. And when I did start moving again, it wasn't out of healing. It was out of rage. I started pacing my apartment at night, writing long, unsent emails, drafting texts to my mom like, "Why did you laugh? Did you ever believe in me? Do you even like me?" I never sent them, but they lived on my phone like splinters. The thing about emotional collapse is that it doesn't announce itself. It just leaks into everything. My work started slipping. I'd reread emails 5 times before sending them. I second-guessed everything I said in meetings. I flinched when someone raised their voice too suddenly. One afternoon, my manager pulled me aside and asked, gently, "Is something going on?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to scream. My sister hates me, and I think my parents do too, and I don't know who I am anymore. But I smiled and said, "Just tired." Tired. The universal mask. One night, I opened Instagram and saw Madison's latest post. She was at a rooftop party, laughing into a cocktail glass, arm looped around our mom. The caption read, "Grateful for the women who always lift me up." That's when it hit me. She didn't feel guilt. She felt victory. And that twisted something in me. I started questioning everything. Was it me? Was I really that dramatic? Did I imagine the sabotage? That's the worst part of emotional abuse. It doesn't just break you. It makes you doubt your own memory. But the confirmation came 3 weeks later. Tessa called me late, breathless. "Sky, you're not going to believe this." She had just bumped into Madison at a real estate event in Scottsdale. Said Madison looked surprised to see her. Said she offered her a drink, overly polite. And then, in the middle of small talk, Madison let it slip. She said, Tessa whispered, "Skylar always thinks the world owes her something. I just gave her a reality check." I sat down. "She admitted it?" I asked. Tessa paused. She didn't use the word closet, but yeah, she basically bragged. It wasn't in my head. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I ended the call and just sat there, numb. It was like hearing your villain finally monologue after the damage is done. But instead of relief, I felt worse. Because now I knew for sure. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an old wound reopening. It was intentional harm. The grief hit hard after that. Not just for the interview or the job, but for the illusion. I grieved the sister I thought I had, the family I thought I could fix, the belief that if I just tried hard enough, loved long enough, forgave big enough, they'd come around. They wouldn't. Not ever. And that grief turned into a strange kind of clarity, like finally wiping fog off the mirror and seeing yourself for the first time. Puffy-eyed, raw, but real. So I made a vow. I wouldn't go back. No more second chances for people who weaponize your love. No more bending just to be seen. No more trying to win a game that was rigged from the start. I didn't know what came next. But I knew this. I'd rather be alone in my truth than loved in a lie. And somewhere, under all that hurt, a new fire started to flicker. Not revenge, but something deeper. Reconstruction. They say healing isn't linear. What they don't say is how messy it is. I didn't wake up one day and feel empowered. I didn't cut ties and suddenly thrive. No, healing came like a bad guest, late, loud, and making a mess of everything before it settled in. For weeks after the betrayal, I walked through life like a half-charged phone, functioning but barely. My smiles were soft lies, my responses automatic. I got through the days by minimizing conversation and maximizing avoidance. Eye contact felt dangerous. Mirrors, worse. I stopped answering Tessa's calls. Even Noah's knock on my door went ignored. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was punishment. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. Stripped of ambition, soaked in shame, unsure if anything I ever built was real. Work became mechanical. I showed up, clicked buttons, nodded in meetings. I let good ideas rot in the back of my throat. My boss started copying my colleague on emails, a subtle shift. But I noticed. Everyone does when they start becoming invisible. I tried therapy, twice. The first therapist was bright-eyed and clipboard ready. She said things like, inner child, and radical forgiveness. I never went back. The second was older, slower. She wore knit shawls and let the silences breathe. I told her about the closet on the third visit. I told her how my sister laughed, how my mom dismissed it, how I missed the interview that could have changed everything. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me and said, "Skylar, what made you walk back into their house?" That question haunted me, because the answer wasn't noble, it wasn't hope, it was habit. That's what people don't understand about toxic families. You return not because you trust, but because it's what you've always done. And breaking that pattern? It feels like dying. I started drinking more. Not dangerously, but steadily. A glass of wine at 5. Then another, then a third, just to take the edge off before bed. It dulled the ache. Numb was easier than angry. I also started calling Madison in my head. I'd rehearse entire conversations while washing dishes, imagining her apologizing, begging, finally seeing what she broke, and I, poised and distant, would say something like, "I don't need your apology anymore." It was pathetic, but it kept me from texting her, so I kept doing it. One Friday night, I saw a photo of Lumina and Blake's new hires on LinkedIn. Smiling faces. One of them was someone I recognized from the final interview pool, a guy who'd sat across from me in the waiting room during the first round. His caption said, "Grateful to be starting this next chapter. Dream job unlocked." I stared at that post for 10 full minutes. Then I threw my phone against the couch and cried. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because I did. And I lost it. Not to fate, not to failure, but to family. That night, I got drunk alone for the first time in my life. I called my mom. She didn't pick up. I called my dad. Straight to voicemail. I almost called Madison. But instead, I stared at her contact photo. An old picture of us on the beach, her arm around me. Both of us sunburned and smiling like nothing could touch us. I deleted it. The photo. The contact. The whole damn illusion. That was the first necessary sacrifice. I let go of the fantasy that one day my family would come around. It felt like cutting off a limb, but the pain was clean. Clarifying. After that night, things didn't get better, but they got clearer. I started walking again, not for exercise, but just to move. I'd loop around the block after work, letting the cold slap my face awake. I left my phone at home. I didn't want distractions, just wind and pavement and the sound of my own shoes. One afternoon, I passed a bookstore with a hand-painted sign that said, "You don't have to know where you're going to keep walking." I don't know why, but it stopped me cold. I went inside. That's where I met Jules. She ran the shop. Silver hair, glasses on a string, rings on every finger. She asked if I needed help, and I said I was just browsing, which was code for, "I don't know what I'm doing with my life." She smiled, like she understood anyway. "You ever read Mary Oliver?" she asked. "No." She handed me a book of poems, devotions. "Page 43, she said. "When you're ready." I bought it, mostly out of guilt. But that night, I opened to page 43. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this, too, was a gift. I cried harder reading that than I had in months, not because it made me feel better, but because it made me feel seen. I started stopping by the shop once a week. Jules never pried, never pushed, but she'd always leave a book on the counter with a post-it note. "Thought you'd like this one?" She became my quiet mentor, not a therapist, not a fixer, just someone who saw me, bruises and all, and didn't look away. Then came the false hope. It was mid-April. My mom texted me, for the first time in 2 months. "Just thinking of you. Hope you're okay." I stared at it for a long time. No apology. No mention of what happened. But still, the door was cracked. I responded, "Still healing. Hope you're well." 2 days later, she called. She sounded normal, too normal, like nothing had happened. She asked if I was still in New York, if work was good. Then she said, "We're having a little family dinner in June, Grandma's birthday. Would mean a lot if you came." I felt something tighten in my chest. It was the same script, the same cycle. I asked, "Will Madison be there?" "Of course," she said, like the answer should have been obvious. I didn't respond. Then she added, "I really think you're holding on to this too tightly, Sky. It's been months." There it was. The gut punch, the gaslight. Like grief had an expiration date. I hung up, and I realized the second necessary sacrifice. I wasn't just cutting ties with my sister. I was walking away from the entire system that enabled her. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. "Dear Mom, I love you. But I won't abandon myself to be loved by you. Not anymore. I don't want revenge. I want peace. And I can't find that in a house where my pain is a punchline. I hope one day you see it, but I'm done waiting." I folded it, burned it in a ceramic dish on my fire escape, watched the ashes lift, and for the first time in months, I felt something like relief, like maybe, just maybe, I was no longer lost, not whole yet, but no longer drifting. I wasn't healed, but I was honest. And that's where the real story starts. Healing didn't arrive with fireworks. It crept in quietly, like morning light through cracked blinds, steady, unassuming, but impossible to ignore. The first thing I reclaimed was my breath. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd stand barefoot in my kitchen with a mug of mint tea, watching the skyline blush gold as the city exhaled into life. I turned off my phone during these hours. No emails, no reminders, just breath, light, and stillness. Then I started writing again. Not for work, not for validation, just for me. At first, it came in fragments, sentences that didn't go anywhere, paragraphs that read like torn journal entries. But eventually, it took shape. Stories, essays, observations about grief, boundaries, sisterhood, and the invisible wounds people carry with them. Writing had always been my compass, and I was finally learning to trust it again. Around this time, I also stopped hiding at work. It started with a client pitch. My team lead was out sick and no one wanted to step up. I felt that old voice in my head, the one that used to whisper, "Stay small, don't outshine, don't make waves." But I stood anyway. I walked into the room with a sharp blazer and a sharper outline. I laid out the campaign in clean, confident strokes. I didn't rush. I didn't apologize for being smart. When I finished, there was a beat of silence, then applause. After the meeting, my manager pulled me aside. "Where's that version of you been hiding?" I smiled. She just needed a reason to show up. 3 months later, I got promoted to strategy associate. Not because someone handed it to me, but because I built it, inch by inch, brick by bloody brick. I celebrated with Tessa and Noah at a rooftop bar in Soho. Tessa raised her glass and said, "To Skylar 2.0, upgraded, unbothered, unstoppable." I laughed. But something in me stirred. Because she was right. I wasn't the same girl who cried on gate B12 waiting for a flight out of Phoenix. I had been broken wide open, and instead of rebuilding the old version, I created someone new. I started seeing things differently too. For one, I stopped blaming myself for the way people treated me. That sounds simple. It's not. It's a full-body detox. I stopped rewriting history to make others more comfortable. I let the truth stand. Madison did sabotage me, Mom did laugh, Dad did stay silent, and none of it was my fault. Accepting that gave me power, because if I didn't break it, it wasn't mine to fix. I also redefined love. It didn't look like tiptoeing or over-explaining or bending into impossible shapes. It looked like presence, like quiet consistency, Like Noah. Yeah. Somewhere between door knock deliveries and long walks through Central Park, something shifted. Noah wasn't loud about his feelings. He didn't flood my inbox with poetic confessions. He just showed up. He watered my plants when I forgot. He left playlists in my inbox. He read my essays and said, "This sounds like you finally stopped asking for permission." And one night, after I read him the letter I never sent to my mother, he looked at me for a long time and said, "You're not hard to love, Sky. You've just been loving people who didn't know how. We weren't official. We didn't need labels. But the space between us stopped feeling empty. It felt safe." I also changed my apartment. New curtains, new plants. I sold the beige couch I used to cry into and bought a deep green velvet one. I rearranged the bookshelves, got rid of anything that reminded me of versions of me that no longer existed. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing what I carried forward. By summer, I was journaling every morning. I had a weekly coffee ritual at Jules's bookstore, where we swapped quotes like currency. I launched a Substack called Closet Letters, anonymous letters from people who had been silenced, shamed, or shut down. Submissions poured in. Thousands of readers, dozens of thank you notes. And through all of it, I never once reached out to Madison. Not because I was waiting for her to feel guilt, but because I was done offering bridges to someone who kept setting them on fire. Then, one Tuesday afternoon in September, something happened. I was at the office, halfway through scheduling a campaign timeline, when I saw an event pop up in my inbox. It was from my mom, Grandma's 80th birthday celebration, October 15th or 6 p.m., Camelback Country Club. No note, no explanation, just the invite. I stared at it, pulse steady, hands warm. The same old cycle. Pretend nothing happened. Sweep it under the rug. Serve cake over silence. I hovered over the RSVP button, clicked not attending. Then I opened my calendar and booked a solo trip to Barcelona instead. Same weekend, no explanation needed. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came 2 weeks later, at work. I was heading into a client review meeting when I heard a voice behind me say, "Skylar?" I turned. It was Jason Fields, one of the partners at Lumina and Blake. The firm. The firm. My chest tightened. "We met last year," he said. "You had to reschedule your final round, right? Logistics issue or something." I nodded slowly. "Something like that." He smiled. "I always remembered your case analysis. Sharp work. Ever think of reapplying?" I blinked. Honestly, I moved on. He nodded, but didn't look surprised. "Well, if you change your mind, we've got a few new teams forming this quarter. Send me something." And just like that, the door that had once slammed shut clicked open again. But this time, I wasn't desperate to run through it. I went back to my office and sat in silence. A year ago, I would have begged for this, would have reshaped my entire life to chase it. But now, I realized, I didn't need the old dream to validate the new version of me. I'd built something real, from rubble. Still, I didn't delete his card. I tucked it into my drawer, not as a crutch, but as a reminder that not all endings are permanent, and sometimes the things meant for you find their way back when you're ready. But deep down, I could feel it. The rumble beneath the surface. Something was coming. A collision. A confrontation. A moment where the old world and the new one would meet face to face. And this time, I wouldn't hide in closets. This time, I'd hold the key. It had been 1 year, 2 months, and 13 days since the closet door clicked shut behind me, since I heard her laugh through the crack, since my mother called it funny. I hadn't seen Madison since, not in person. She'd tried twice, once with a comment on one of my essays. Wow, dramatic much. I deleted it without blinking. Once through my mom, who left a voicemail saying, "Madison feels terrible. She misses you." I never replied. But I knew, eventually, we'd collide. Some stories don't end quietly. They circle back when you're strong enough to meet them without flinching. It happened in the most ordinary way. Tessa's wedding. She was getting married in Sedona. Small ceremony. Red Rock backdrop. Barefoot vows and candlelit dinner. She begged me to come. "You can bring Noah," she added. We weren't official. Still weren't calling it anything. But when I told him, he just smiled and said, "I'll book the car." It was my first time back in Arizona since the betrayal. The drive into Sedona was surreal. Canyons carved like cathedral walls. That warm, sacred hush in the air, it felt ancient, like the land had seen 1,000 stories like mine and forgiven them all. The ceremony was beautiful, simple, honest. Tessa cried through her vows. Noah slipped his hand into mine. Then came the reception. Small crowd. String lights, champagne. A soft desert breeze that smelled like sage and possibility. I was laughing with Tessa near the bar when I saw her. Madison. She stood near the patio rail, a flute of champagne in one hand, phone in the other, hair styled perfect, dress clinging like it missed the body it used to know. My stomach tightened. She hadn't changed, but I had. She noticed me seconds later. Her lips parted. For a flicker, she looked surprised. Maybe even nervous. Then the mask returned, that smooth, polished smile. She walked toward me like nothing had happened. "Skylar," she said too loudly. Tessa immediately turned, eyes narrowing, then excused herself. Madison tilted her head. "Didn't think I'd see you here." I sipped my drink. "It's Tessa's wedding. Of course I'm here." She nodded, laughed softly. "Right. Of course. You look different." "I am." There was a pause. She looked around, like she was searching for a softer way in. But I didn't offer her one. She tried again. "Mom told me about your promotion, and that little blog you started." Little. I felt the old spark, the one that used to flare into anger, but I didn't let it catch. "I've been published in Harper's and The Cut," I said. The blog was just the beginning. Her smile faltered. "You always had a flair for drama," she said. "And you always had a gift for cruelty," I replied, gently. Silence. The patio around us blurred. She blinked. "Wow. Still bitter?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Not the face, the energy. The way her eyes darted when she wasn't sure of her power. The tightness in her jaw. The way her mouth pulled into a smile she didn't mean. And then I saw it. The truth. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to measure, to see if I was still smaller than her. And she couldn't find a version of me she could dominate. That's when her expression shifted, ever so slightly. I saw it. Fear. She stepped back, folding her arms. "You know, Sky, I never meant for things to go that far. You could have rescheduled the interview. You just didn't want it bad enough." I took a long breath, let it fill every inch of my lungs, and then I said it. One line, calm, clear, measured. "No, Madison, I just didn't want to become you to get it." Silence. Her jaw clenched. The words landed not like a slap, but like a mirror. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw it. The flicker of recognition. The part of her that knew exactly what I meant. Because if you strip away the blame, the vanity, the years of sabotage, Madison had always been afraid of something. That I might succeed without cruelty. That I might become the woman she pretended to be, without the mask. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hand trembled as she set down her glass. "You really think you're better than me now?" she asked. I smiled, but not with arrogance. with peace. No, Madison. I think I know who I am now. That's enough. And just like that, I walked away. Not because I won, but because I didn't need to. Noah was waiting near the dance floor. He saw my face, tilted his head, silent question in his eyes. I just nodded. Later that night, under the stars, Tessa hugged me and whispered, "You did it, didn't you?" "I didn't scream," I said. "Even better," she grinned. Before we left, I turned to look back at the patio. Madison stood alone near the railing, glass empty, eyes distant, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry or vindicated. I felt free. There's a moment, after the wave breaks and recedes, where the world feels impossibly still. That's what the weeks after the confrontation felt like. Not triumphant, not hollow, just still. Back in New York, I unpacked slowly. I lit a candle, cinnamon and cedar. I washed my sheets, watered the new fern Noah gifted me. The days moved forward without pushing. There was no urge to post, no need to explain, no rush to fill the silence. The peace wasn't loud, it was earned. For so long, I thought healing would come with noise. Fireworks, milestones, maybe even applause. But what it really looked like was this: getting home from work and humming while I cooked, walking barefoot across my apartment, reading with my phone turned off, remembering that silence, in the right hands, is a sanctuary, not a threat. I never wrote back to Madison. I didn't need to. Some letters lose their urgency when you reclaim your voice. One night, I found an old shoebox buried in my closet. Inside were birthday cards, printed poems, a crumpled acceptance letter to that Stanford writing program I never got to attend. I smiled at the younger version of me who'd tucked it all away like proof, as if one day someone would need evidence of her worth. I didn't need it anymore. I burned the letters in a dish on my fire escape, just like the one I never sent to my mother. I whispered a soft thank you as the ashes curled upward. Thank you for showing me what I deserved. Thank you for forcing me to choose myself. Thank you for the fire that became my light. I thought I'd feel empty, but I felt light, lighter than I had in years. Some endings don't need closure, just distance and clarity. By fall, the Closet Letters newsletter had turned into a community. 1,000 subscribers, then 5, then 10. People started sharing their own stories, of quiet betrayals, of breaking cycles, of setting themselves free. I began hosting small writing circles online, then a pop-up event in Brooklyn. The first time someone recognized me, I froze. "You're Skylar, right?" the woman asked. "You changed my life." I told her she changed her own. I just held up the mirror. Career-wise, Lumina and Blake did reach out again. They invited me to apply for a creative strategy lead. I sat with the offer for a week, considered it carefully, and then declined, kindly. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because I'd already found my purpose. I didn't need the prestige. I had the peace. Noah and I still weren't calling it anything. But the way he held my hand while I read submissions, the way he remembered how I take my tea, the way he looked at me like I was already whole, it told me everything I needed to know. We took a weekend trip to Portland, rented a cabin, no service, no agenda. We read on the porch, watched fog roll through the trees. One morning, I woke up before him and watched the light filter through his lashes, and I thought, so this is what it feels like to be loved gently. There was a time I thought love had to be earned, proved, performed. Now I know. It's received. It's chosen. It's safe. In December, I got a call from Jules at the bookstore. She was retiring, moving to Maine. She asked if I wanted to take over the shop. I laughed at first. "Me, run a bookstore." "You already do," she said. "You just don't have a cash register yet." It wasn't a logical move. It wasn't planned. But I said yes. And on January 15th, I put my name on the lease, Sky & Co. Books. Small hand-painted sign. Plants in the window. Poetry taped to the glass. We opened with a community night. Tea. Blankets. Typewriters. The shelves were filled with stories that helped people survive, that helped me survive. And tucked between fiction and memoir, I left one shelf empty. A shelf for forgiveness. Not because I'd filled it yet, but because one day I might. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always loud either. Sometimes it's just letting go of the hope that the past could have been different. Sometimes it's saying, that happened, and I'm still here. The last time I saw my mother was at a coffee shop near Union Square. She was visiting an old friend and asked if we could meet. I said yes, on one condition. No talk of Madison, no mention of the closet, just present moment truth. She agreed. She looked older. Tired, but softer. We sipped oat milk lattes in silence for a while. Then she said, "You've changed." I said, "I had to." She nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you." I didn't respond, I just let the words land. That was enough. Sometimes, almost apologies are as far as people can go. And sometimes, grace is recognizing the attempt. As she stood to leave, she touched my hand. "I hope you come home for Christmas one year," she said. I smiled. "I am home." She understood. We haven't spoken since. But that moment closed a door gently, not with bitterness, but with finality. Now, most evenings, I walk through the bookstore before locking up. I run my fingers along the spines, flick the lights off section by section. I light a candle on the poetry shelf. Then I sit in the big green armchair and read until the city dims outside. I'm not healed completely. I don't think healing is a destination anymore. It's a practice, a choice, a quiet refusal to betray yourself ever again. And as I sit there, sometimes I imagine the girl I used to be, the one locked in that dark laundry room, screaming for someone to hear her. I picture her standing now, on the other side of the door. Older, wiser, stronger. She's not screaming anymore. She's holding the key. And she's finally walking away.